Next is we have the preconditions of the audit. These preconditions must exist before you can accept an audit engagement. So number one, we have the applicability of the financial reporting framework. So financial statements are prepared in accordance with a certain criteria. So like, for example, the PFRS. So we have to consider whether such framework is applicable under the circumstances of our client. So like, for example, here in the Philippines, so depending on their type of registration with the SEC, there's also this applicable financial reporting framework, whether full PFRS or PFRS for SME or PFRS for small entity, or even companies that have, for example, branches or operations abroad. So the countries where they operate outside the Philippines might also require no specific criteria or financial reporting framework that will be applicable to the company. So another is to obtain the agreement of management. So the agreement of the management will be documented in what we call engagement letter, which will contain the terms of audit engagement. And that is very critical or very important before we start our audit engagement. Now, if the management offers an engagement that has a limited scope, we cannot accept that limited engagement as an audit engagement. So we will cover certain types of engagement at the end of our or toward the end of our course, so which could fit some limited engagement, but we cannot accept them at this point as audit engagement. And then finally, as mentioned earlier, if the preconditions of the audit are not met, so meaning it's either the financial reporting framework is not applicable, or the auditor was not able to obtain agreement with the management, then the auditor should not accept the proposed engagement. So next, the responsibilities of the management and the auditor. So we have discussed this exhaustively in our previous video lectures. But to summarize, the responsibility of the management is to prepare and present the financial statements in accordance with the applicable financial reporting framework, and to allow the auditor, of course, to perform his or her audit procedures to validate those financial statements. In contrast, the responsibility of the auditor is to express an opinion about the fairness of the financial statements in all material respects in accordance with the applicable financial reporting framework. Now let's proceed with the terms of audit engagement and the engagement letter. As one of the preconditions of an audit, take note that the auditor and the client should agree on the terms of the engagement. And it is in the interest not only of the auditor, but of both parties to have this agreement documented in an engagement letter before the commencement of the engagement to avoid any misunderstandings with respect to the engagement. So take note that this engagement letter, which documents the agreement of both parties, should be agreed upon before the start of the audit engagement, not during or not after the audit engagement. So these terms of audit engagement will be documented in what we call an engagement letter. This engagement letter documents and confirms the appointment of the auditor, the objective and the scope of the audit, the auditor's and management's responsibilities, and the form of any reports to be issued. So take note, usually in a typical company, it would be the audit committee who would hire and appoint the auditor. So therefore, the auditor should have this document signed with the company's appropriate official, like for example, the audit committee, before the start of the engagement or before the start or commencement of any audit engagement. And what are the contents of this engagement letter? So as mentioned here, so we have the objective and scope of the audit, the responsibilities of both parties, auditor and management, as well as take note, form of any reports to be issued. So any deliverables that will be coming from the auditor. So take note also that the type of opinion should not yet be indicated here in the engagement letter, as the type of opinion will depend on the procedures and evidence that will be obtained by the auditor during the engagement. So to elaborate, let's discuss the principal contents of the engagement letter. So we have number one, So the scope of the audit, so meaning to say, the auditor and the management should agree. So which, for example, period or types of financial statements would be included in the engagement. So including the general procedures that or the expected procedures on a macro level or general level that the auditor is expected to perform. So it will not yet include the detailed audit procedures that the auditor will do. So that is not included in the engagement letter. Next, included also in the engagement letter with the form of any communication to be issued. So for example, aside from the auditor's report, so would the auditor issue any other type of communication such as a management letter, so which is a separate document from the audit report on the course or during the course of the engagement. So the engagement letter would normally include also any limitations of the engagement so that the audit committee will be aware, so that even if the auditor performed the procedures in accordance with PSAs, there are still misstatements that could not be detected. Engagement letter would also include arrangement regarding planning and performance of the audit, including composition of the auditee. So with respect to coordination, for example, to the or with the company's personnel, so the arrangement would be included in the engagement letter. The engagement letter would also include the fact that management will issue written representation. So we'll discuss written representation toward the end part of the audit process when we discuss audit completion. The engagement letter would also include a reminder to the management the need for timely submission of requirements, and also the responsibility on the part of the management to inform the auditor of any facts or circumstances that may affect the financial statements. So of course, the engagement letter will also include arrangement as to the fees and billings. So because this engagement letter will also serve as the contract between the auditor and the management or the company. And finally, the engagement letter would also include acknowledgement of the receipt on the part of the management of the engagement letter and their agreement to its terms. So the engagement letter will include signatories on the appropriate officers or official of the client so that are authorized to bind the company with respect to the audit engagement. In addition, if relevant, these matters may also be included in the engagement letter. 1. Arrangement regarding the work of others, such as other auditor, in case we will be auditing a group of companies, experts, internal audit personnel, and other client personnel, and even previous auditor in case of initial audit. So because remember earlier, there is a need to communicate with the predecessor auditor in case this is an initial audit. Restriction as to the auditor's liabilities, reference to any further agreements, and any obligation to provide the audit working paper to third party. So similar to what I mentioned earlier, for example, if there is, let's say, a group audit, there may be involved, there may be other auditors involved, and they might also ask our working paper.